Okay, people, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Santa's coming to town.
Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him.
A Christmas elf discovers that he's actually a human, and he leaves the North Pole to find his father in New York City. This week, we chat about where all the Ray's pizzas have gone, the 80s sitcom that Buddy the Elf would have felt at home in, and the real holiday song that should be canceled. Then we pass through the 7 levels of the candy cane forest, through the sea of swirly twirly gumdrops, and we walk through the Lincoln Tunnel to find out if Elf stands the test of time.
It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut. Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and Merry Christmas for those who celebrate. Welcome to the Test of Time podcast. My name is Alan Noah. And who are you with that jolly Santa Claus hat and that big fake beard?
Well, that would be me, James Brief, and it's a real beard, and this hat is part of my head. How dare you?
Oh, I mean, the real beard I could see is a quarantine thing, but the hat is part of your head? I mean, it's a red hat with a fluffy white ball at the end.
Oh, well argued. I guess it isn't. So, how are you, Al?
I am all right. Merry Christmas, James, said one Jew to the other Jew.
Merry Christmas. Of course, I loved Christmas because Christmas for me was always vacation. Hanukkah kind of occurs anywhere from sometimes even late November, but any time during December, and usually it was during school. It said most of it is over the weeknights, but Christmas was always like everything shuts down, so it's pretty cool.
That's a good point. I mean, I never really celebrated Christmas as a kid, but now that I am married to a woman who's Christian, we celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah. So basically, my kids get spoiled pretty much throughout the month of December. So it works out pretty well for them. But, you know, we were talking about doing a Christmas movie, and this just seemed like one of those movies that we had to do because it's Elf. It's Will Ferrell. It's 17 years old, so it passes our 15 years or older rule. And yeah, it was just a fun movie to watch, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. But first, you wanted to talk about a different kind of Christmas movie. Is that right?
Now, this is more of a genre. I don't specifically mean this brand name, but I have been obsessed with Hallmark Christmas movies. Just the concept of these for years. Do you know what these kind of films are, Al?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much all just like one general formula of a rom-com, except with bad acting and like J-level actors. Their characters fall in love around Christmas time, and they're all more or less basically the same. Isn't that like what the genre is?
I mean, that's kind of almost every love story, but the Christmas thing is always kind of the same formulas of big city slicker woman goes back to the small town and she's got a stuffy old investment banker boyfriend back in the city, and she goes home and there's that guy that she didn't really know back in high school or some other reason, and he also has a girlfriend that for some reason is bad there too, and in the end, something Christmas spirit, and everything is right with the world. Throw in your sassy sidekick best friend or little other things, a cute little brother, and there you have a Hallmark Christmas film.
It's funny that you mentioned that because the Simpsons Christmas episode this year was basically a parody of those kinds of movies, and they definitely had the whole big city woman goes to the small town because it's the Simpsons. It was Springfield, and she has her fiance back home, but she kind of falls for Principal Skinner, and I won't tell you any spoilers of it, but it's definitely meant to be a spoof on that genre.
Oh, that's fantastic. And my girlfriend and I, we actually just watched a film. They managed to incorporate a Hanukkah theme into a Hallmark Christmas movie.
Okay, so it was like an interfaith couple kind of a deal?
Yes, the movie was called Mistletoe and Menorahs. It was amazing. Oh, it had every single box checked off, and I was quoting the lines before they happened. It was fantastic. The premise is basically that you have this budget Reese Witherspoon, and she is like Miss Christmas. It is her favorite time. She loves decorating. She makes the cupcakes, and there's a very big client that invites her to his holiday party because she's so charming, and she goes, "Oh, I am all about that." And he goes, "Oh, well, we'll see you on the first night of Hanukkah." And he walks away. What did he say? So, guess what happens, Al?
She learns about Hanukkah?
She decides to get Hanukkah lessons from a friend of hers who is Jewish, because, any Jew will give you a lesson on Hanukkah. But don't think anything's going to happen between these two, because this girl, she's got a lovely boyfriend. He's actually very sweet. He brought her flowers, and he has this lovely girlfriend too. Guess what? The other boyfriend-girlfriends they had, they were totally horrible, cheating on them. But guess what? They're made for each other, and after all is said and done, the woman winds up saying the candle prayers at the holiday party, and then the movie ends with, "Wait till we tell her about the Passover Seder," and then he puts his arms around her.
You used the word fantastic to describe this movie. Is that correct?
I said it was amazing because I had finally gotten to see one of these films, and I just thought it was fantastic because I just thought it was the exact stereotype that I thought it would be, and I just had a lot of fun watching it.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed watching that. It sounds like a living, waking nightmare to me. But if you had fun, that's all that matters. But let's talk about a movie with much more mainstream appeal, 2003's Elf. I'm going to guess that most people know this movie or are familiar with this movie, but just in case you have never heard of it, it's a movie about a guy named Buddy, played by Will Ferrell, who's a human who accidentally makes his way to the North Pole as a baby and is raised by elves. When he learns that he's human, Buddy travels to New York City to find his biological father. Unfortunately, his father, Walter Hobbs, who's played by James Caan, is a curmudgeonly Scrooge-like man who wants nothing to do with Buddy. Meanwhile, Buddy tries to adjust to big city life. He finds romance with a woman named Jovi, played by Zooey Deschanel. Buddy's love of life, sugar, and Christmas is infectious, and he ultimately helps his father discover his humanity and spread some holiday cheer. Now, this movie came out in 2003. I am pretty confident that I saw it in the movie theater, and I feel like it was a decent-sized hit that year, right?
Well, it's an interesting film because it opens November 7th, 2003, and actually it opened at number 2 with 8.9 million. Number 1, it was the conclusion to one of the most successful trilogies of all time, and the debut of Elf was not going to knock this off of its third week at number 1.
Matrix?
Yeah, it's correct. So this was The Matrix Revolutions, was still at number 1. But this $8.9 million debut film, it wound up grossing $173 million domestically. That's a 20 times multiplier. This film did so well just in the box office, and that has nothing to do with the fact that it has become somewhat of a modern day Christmas classic, and it just plays over and over. It's the kind of thing that you can't imagine how much money this film has made. And do you know who actually produced this film? It's very surprising. It's one of the producers.
A producer? No, who produced it?
Someone very famous, and I'll give you a hint. The producer is actually the star of one of the most famous Christmas films of all time, and this is a Christmas film from the 80s, and it's not Christmas Vacation.
A Christmas Story.
That's right. Yeah, Peter Billingsley. He's Ralphie, and he became like a buddy of Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn. Like, they produce and make films together. So he's one of the producers of this film.
I did see that he has a cameo in this movie. He's like one of the elves in the beginning.
Yeah, they made a few films together.
Interesting. So the movie starts with this little prologue of Buddy as a baby, and basically he's at an orphanage and he sneaks into Santa's bag of toys while Santa is distracted eating some cookies. It's a little bit weird because then he just shows up at the North Pole and they're like, wait, who's that? And he's wearing a little Buddy brand diapers. So they say, oh, his name must be Buddy. But then they also seem to know like who his biological parents are later. So if they have that information, which you could just say is magic, okay, fine, sure, it's Santa. But then how come they didn't know that Buddy wasn't his real name? Like, isn't that a little bit weird?
That is one of the several plot holes in this film, and we will discuss every one of them, Al.
There are more? Ooh, I love a good plot hole.
Ah, yes. One thing we have to mention is the story is narrated by Papa Elf, the elf that is basically Buddy's adopted father, the North Pole, is played by Bob Newhart, and so funny.
Yeah, he's great. And we see Buddy grow up in the North Pole, and he is gigantic compared to all of the other elves. They do some really cool forced perspective shots. They just make Will Ferrell look so much larger than these elves. And of course, Will Ferrell is tall in real life, but even so, they really exaggerate it. And he just isn't good at being an elf. He stinks at making toys. They have him become a toy tester, which is the bad job for an elf. And he's testing all the Jack-in-the-Boxes. And it's pretty funny, like just the way he gets scared every single time. I remember my son used to do that when he was a baby, but he liked it. He liked being scared of the Jack-in-the-Box. I saw a thing that apparently Jon Favreau, the director, he would use a remote control to set them off and catch Will Ferrell off guard so that the reaction was kind of genuine. When he looked surprised, he really was kind of surprised. But he finds out that he's a human. He decides he's going to leave the North Pole and search for his real father. There's a great bit where Santa's giving Buddy some advice about New York City. He says that if you see gum on the sidewalk, don't chew it. It's not for free. And there's 30 famous original Rays, but only one of them is like the real original one, which is kind of a joke that's mostly for New Yorkers. But I feel like a lot of people have heard that. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit insider New York kind of a joke, but I'm guessing that a lot of people know that.
And it's a little bit outdated because I feel like 20 years ago, there were Ray's pizzas everywhere in Manhattan. There's not that many anymore. There's a lot of good pizza places around that have replaced Ray's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but I don't think there's as many Ray's as there were. I could be wrong.
Okay. But then when he's leaving the North Pole, he sees all of these stop motion creatures. He talks to the snowman and the penguin who starts crying when Buddy's leaving, and it's really kind of funny. And then a giant narwhal comes up from the water and Buddy's on an iceberg sailing away and they're all saying goodbye. It's like a silly little thing, but it's cute. It really adds a lot to the world of this movie.
The first time I saw it, I actually think I might have been a little bit annoyed by it because I'm like, it's kind of a little bit of a different genre. I actually get a different appreciation now. I think this is Jon Favreau's way of saying, look, this is just a magic place, and any of you that are saying things like your plot holes about, how come they couldn't find the baby's name? But it's magic, there's magical snowmen, okay? The answer is magic. So I think that he's really trying to incorporate it here, and he's like, nah, can we move on? You see Will Ferrell like run across mountains in his elf uniform, and he finally gets out at the Lincoln Tunnel in Manhattan.
Yeah, the shot of him like pressed against the wall, walking through the Lincoln Tunnel is just classic. And then he talks about it whenever he tells people about how he got from the North Pole to New York City. He says that he passed through the 7 levels of the candy cane forest, through the sea of swirly, twirly gumdrops, and then he walked through the Lincoln Tunnel. That line cracks me up every time. You know, the Lincoln Tunnel is way funnier than the Midtown Tunnel or the Holland Tunnel. Or I don't know, is the Lincoln Tunnel funnier than the Holland Tunnel? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Holland Tunnel's a little confusing because you might not know that's even New York City.
That's a good point. But he loves being in New York City. He sees a sign for world's best coffee at some random diner, and he's really excited, and he runs in and congratulates everybody for making the world's best coffee, and everyone just kind of looks at him like, huh? He does the thing where he runs around through a revolving door, which definitely reminded me of the opening of Perfect Strangers. Did you watch Perfect Strangers back in the 80s?
Well, I remember Perfect Strangers. I had Balky and his cousin. But what was the theme song? Don't sing it. I want to hear the actual clip from it, please.
Okay, I will put in the actual clip. Standing tall on the wings of my dreams, rise and fall on the wings of my dreams. I probably just blew out a lot of people's eardrums. Sorry if I did. But you can't sing that song quietly. But let's get back to Elf. So he goes to visit his dad at work. He works in the Empire State Building. For anyone who doesn't know, the Empire State Building is like a tourist destination, and you can go to the top and you can see the city from the observation deck, but it is an actual office building and people work there. And that's where Buddy's dad works. And he thinks that this is some weird Christmas-gram, and it's not. He names his mother, who's this guy's, old girlfriend from decades ago. But even still, he's like, this is some kind of weird scam. And he has Buddy thrown out. One of the security guards says, hey, you like being an elf? Go to Gimbel's. And Gimbel's was a real department store in New York City that used to be a big competitor of Macy's. It has gone out of business, but they use the name Gimbel's here, I guess, because that way they didn't have to clear the name Macy's.
I actually didn't know Gimbel's was a real thing. I totally didn't even remember of that. So I just assumed it was made up.
I assume you've never seen Miracle on 34th Street?
I have, but I've seen it once, and I don't remember the name of the store at which I'm going to guess is Gimbel's.
No, it takes place in Macy's. But there is a big subplot of that where it's like, what's Gimbel's doing? And, well, Mr. Macy's going to hear about this. Well, I got to talk to Mr. Gimbel. The main crux of that movie takes place in Macy's, but Gimbel's is very heavily mentioned. Anyway, it's very clearly meant to be Macy's in this movie. It's a giant department store, and there's multiple floors, and there's a huge Christmas section. And I have to give a special shout out to the guy who plays the manager in this Christmas department. It's an actor named Faison Love, and he is just so funny. He's exasperated. He starts yelling at Buddy because he assumes that Buddy works there, and I really love that character. He's really funny.
Yeah, he's been in a bunch of stuff before. He's in a lot of films but he's not the star usually, or as far as I know. But did you notice what his name was in the film?
Yes, his name is Wanda, because the character was supposed to be played by Wanda Sykes, and then she backed out at the last minute, and so they just left the character's name Wanda for some weird reason.
I think more of a joke. But because
Right.
His name doesn't really matter. But I agree, he plays it very well. And basically, Buddy winds up going into the Christmas area, and Faison Love's character, he basically makes an announcement that Santa's coming, and Buddy basically goes crazy because he's so excited that Santa, his Santa, or he thinks his Santa from the North Pole, is going to be coming the next day. So he decides to stay overnight, and he decides that this is really not up to the North Pole Christmas spirit standard. So in one night, he's able to kind of use his elf powers, and is able to decorate the entire store in an insane winter wonderland.
Right. And then, quote unquote, Santa shows up. It is not the real Santa that Buddy knows. It is an imposter Santa played by Artie Lang. I will say, having been to the Christmases that they have at Macy's, those Santas that they have there, those are good Santas. They are good. Like, they have like real long white beards. They are legit looking Santas. This guy is just Artie Lang in a fake beard, and Buddy is pissed off, and he's saying, you are not the real Santa. He's telling kids not to talk to him. He says, you smell, and then they get into a fight when he pulls the fake Santa's beard off, and they go crashing through all of the beautiful displays that Buddy has made, and it's pretty funny. Before this big fight, Buddy has met a woman who works at the department store. Her name is Jovi, played by Zooey Deschanel, and he overhears her singing in the employee locker room. She's singing Baby It's Cold Outside, and he's just so drawn to her singing. He goes into the bathroom and he starts duetting with her, and obviously that's a creepy thing to do, but she's still kind of charmed by him when he says that he thinks she's got the most beautiful singing voice in the whole history of the world.
Yeah, and I guess Test of Time song, because that song, is not really played as much anymore today.
I think there are people who have said, that song is canceled. And it's not really. It's just like a thing that, hey, that one line about what's in that drink is a little problematic now, but it's still a song that they play on the radio. I don't think it's officially canceled. I think it's fine. I will say Zooey Deschanel really can sing. She is a musician. She's in a group called She and Him, and they have several albums. They have 2 Christmas albums, in fact, and on the first one, she does sing Baby It's Cold Outside. So she did it again for that album. So the song isn't totally permanently canceled as far as Zooey Deschanel is concerned. I guess at least as of the recording of that album. But Buddy is arrested because of this fight with Artie Lang Santa, and his dad bails him out. Walter Hobbs comes through.
We haven't mentioned yet, I mean, you mentioned it in the summary, but Walter Hobbs is played by James Caan. He was in The Godfather.
And The Godfather Part 2.
Was he in The Godfather Part 2? Oh, no, he's not. He's not in Godfather Part 3. That's it. They didn't bring his character back in Part 3. But James Caan, he's a tough guy. And it's funnier knowing he's James Caan. But I mean, he plays the role very well. But James Caan is really well cast in this role.
Yeah, he's great. He bails Buddy out and then gets him DNA tested to see if he really is, in fact, his son. And Buddy is eating all the cotton balls at the doctor's office, which is kind of funny. And the doctor is Jon Favreau, who is a director who has been known to give himself cameos in the movies he directs, notably Iron Man. He is Tony Stark's driver, Happy. That was a small role in Iron Man 1, which, has since paid off in however many movies he's been in because of that.
Yeah, I mean, can we appreciate Jon Favreau for a second? How underappreciated this guy is.
Is he underappreciated? I think he's very well respected and very highly appreciated in Hollywood now.
I don't think he gets the praise that he should. I mean, this guy launched the MCU with Iron Man, and he basically made this film without a script. I don't know if you know that whole story, but basically Iron Man was shot without a script. They kind of made it up as they went along. And for Disney, he filmed The Jungle Book and The Lion King. I've said several times that I have kind of written off Star Wars. I'm not against it, but I kind of written off, except for the one thing that Jon Favreau created, which is The Mandalorian. He is fantastic. And then he's able to do a movie like Elf, which is completely original. We talked about him in Swingers. I mean, this is a guy with a lot of talent. And I agree with you that he's very well known, but I don't think he's known as much as he should be. I think J.J. Abrams is known more than him. And I'm not knocking J.J. Abrams. I think Jon Favreau is it's just a more impressively wide resume. It's just, this guy can do it all. He can act, he could direct, he could produce, he can write, he can story build, universe build. It's great.
I agree. I have only the highest respect for Jon Favreau. This was his first major film that he directed. He directed Made before this. That was a smaller budget film, but this was the first major studio movie he directed.
Yeah, and actually his follow-up to this is a very little scene and very fun film. Have you ever heard or seen a movie called Zathura?
Oh, I've heard of it. It's the Jumanji sequel, right?
It's not a sequel in any way. It's in the Jumanji universe. Another board game gone amok, let's just say. But nothing to do with Jumanji. It's the similar premise, but let Jon Favreau have it. A very, very different world of things go wrong, let's just say.
Interesting.
But let's move on. Jon Favreau's character, he plays the doctor in this one scene, and his role is to confirm to Walter Hobbs that, yeah, the paternity test shows that he is, in fact, the dad. I do want to say that most primary care facilities, I work in a primary care doctor's office, we do have blood testing on site, but apparently this guy can go to the next room and come back a minute later with a DNA result in 2003. So I'm impressed, but again, talking magical snowmen in this film, so let's not think about that.
Well, there's magic in the North Pole. It doesn't mean there should be magic in the pediatrician's offices of New York City. But maybe he's like the Maury doctor. He sees kids in his pediatric practice, but then he also like does paternity tests for Maury so that he can say, you are the father.
And then either do backflips or someone runs off the stage crying. Yeah, the whole shebang. But he realizes it is his son, and he does decide to bring Buddy home, and he brings him home to his family, and his family totally, or his wife totally accepts him right away. His wife's played by the always great Mary Steenburgen.
Right, and Will Ferrell liked working with her so much that he worked with her again in Step Brothers a few years later. But yeah, she's all about Buddy and doesn't seem to mind that her husband had a kid a long time ago. She's very bohemian about it, but they also have their own son, Michael. Michael's not that impressed with Buddy right away because Buddy's weird. He asks for syrup to put on his spaghetti. He drinks an entire 2-liter bottle of Coke and then makes this huge burp, which my kids thought was hilarious when we watched it, but Michael is a little too cool for it. And he's just not impressed with his new brother that he has. But then Buddy finds him after school one day, and some bullies start throwing snowballs at him. And Buddy is really good at snowball fights, and he defends Michael. And then all of a sudden, Michael likes Buddy.
It's actually a very creative way to get Buddy on his side. This kid needs something that's going to impress, what is he, like 13, 14 years old?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's just a great thing. And also there's always the, getting one up on the bullies, which is great.
That whole scene made me think of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the song, which, I mean, we were talking about the problematic Baby It's Cold Outside. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that to me is like a really terrible moral in that song, which is that like all of the other reindeer are mean to Rudolph. They hate him. They don't let him play in any of the reindeer games. But then Rudolph saves the day and then they're all nice to him. Like, that's not a great lesson.
I agree with you, Al. I think that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is a story about a reindeer who has a physical deformity, and they make fun of him the entire time and won't let him do a job he's perfectly capable of doing until they need him, and they exploit his deformity for their gain.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that's the song that should be canceled. I mean, really. But it is sort of similar to what happens in this movie because Michael really only likes Buddy because Buddy helps him out. But whatever, because then it's cute and Buddy brings the Christmas spirit to their apartment. They get a huge tree. They chop one down in Central Park. It's way too big for their apartment. And there's a moment where Buddy decides that he's going to figure out how to get the star on the very top of the tree. And like Michael's kind of talking in the foreground and Buddy's in the background. You see him run, jump on the couch and leap onto the tree. The tree then collapses on top of him. And this is all happening in the background. It's a great sight gag. My kids were cracking up. My daughter was like laughing for a solid 5 minutes at that scene. It's very, very funny. But you know who isn't laughing? The dad, Walter Hobbs, he's having some problems at work. He works at a publishing company and they make children's books, but their last book printed with like a couple of pages missing. Walter knew about these missing pages. He signed off on it anyway, and his boss is furious and says, "You need to pitch me a new story by Christmas Eve." So he's under a lot of pressure. He has his two best writers working on it, played by Andy Richter and Kyle Gass, and their idea is to bring in another writer, this like phenom of children's book writing, and that author is played by Peter Dinklage, who I guess most people know as Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones.
He's one of the greatest actors of our generation. So in this film, it's such a treat to see him. And his scene is fantastic because it turns out that Buddy, he starts coming to work with Walter, and he's getting in the way, and he's really annoyed. So Walter winds up putting him downstairs in the mailroom. But then that doesn't work out. But eventually, Buddy winds up bursting into the meeting room while Peter Dinklage's character Miles Finch is making his pitch. And it's a cringy scene on paper. It's really, really the acting of Will Ferrell that you truly believe that Buddy the Elf is such a belovedly innocent character that he just doesn't know how horrible he's acting. There's a very fine line between this scene is disgusting and making fun of Peter Dinklage versus, oh my God, this is absolutely adorable and hysterical. It's a masterful scene, I think.
Right, because what Buddy is doing is he keeps calling Peter Dinklage's character an elf, because Peter Dinklage is a little person. I believe that's the politically correct way of saying it. And he's not saying it to be offensive. He's just saying, oh, you're an elf, because Buddy is an elf and he lived in the North Pole. But Miles Finch, that's Peter Dinklage's character, is furious. He's getting really mad and he says, go ahead, call me elf one more time. And Buddy, of course, says, oh, you're an angry little elf. And then Miles Finch runs and attacks him and storms out. And then Walter is furious because he needed him to pitch him a story. And so Walter basically just kind of disowns Buddy. He says, I don't care that you're my kid. Just get out of my life. And Buddy is sad and depressed, and he writes a note about he's leaving and he doesn't belong anywhere. He writes it in beautiful calligraphy on an Etch-a-Sketch, which is a good sight gag. And he just kind of goes moping around New York City.
Yeah, and now looking for him, you have Jovi looking for him because we didn't really talk about, but Buddy and Jovi wind up going on a wonderful date together and really start falling for each other, and Jovi even gives them a little kiss at the end. But that's right. But now she's looking for him, and Michael, he bursts into his dad just as his dad is giving this important Christmas Eve pitch. And he's like, Dad, Buddy's missing. And it's basically, Dad, your old adult son who's totally ignorant on everything, he's missing in New York. And, it's Christmas Eve, and suddenly the old Scrooge, he gets a heart. I couldn't even believe it.
Well, I mean, you should have been able to believe it. It's a big moment for Walter's character because it's either you do the work thing or you do the family thing. You have to choose between your job or your kids.
It was not even that. It's not choose between staying late and doing a pitch or Christmas, because actually he has nothing to pitch. And it turns out that Miles, when he got really mad at Buddy for calling him an elf, he drops his idea book. And actually, Walter's tempted to steal his ideas. So he has a choice not between family and work, but between family and stealing.
Well, he doesn't seem to be at all bothered to steal Miles' ideas. That was the plan. But he's got these two other writers that could make the pitch to the boss. So it just seems like a very easy solve of hey, I got to run. You guys pitch him the book. Why does he himself have to do it? He kind of doesn't need to.
That's very true. But it's 2003 and maybe he was the only one who knew how to use PowerPoint. I really doubt James Caan's character knew how to use PowerPoint, actually.
Yeah, and they also didn't have time to make a PowerPoint.
Right.
I don't know. It's a small detail, but he does the right thing. Walter and Michael go looking for Buddy, and they find him in Central Park, where Buddy finds Santa Claus. Santa Claus is having problems with his engine on the sleigh. It's established earlier in the movie that Buddy's adoptive father is the whiz mechanic who fitted the sleigh with this amazing engine. The sleigh runs on this engine because it can't just run on Christmas spirit anymore. It used to back in the old days, but now people don't believe. And so now Buddy is trying to fix Santa's sleigh, and Michael grabs Santa's Naughty or Nice book and runs to the local news reporter who's outside of Central Park and is trying to prove that Santa is real so that more people will believe, so that will help the sleigh fly as well. And he goes through like some names in the book and says what they really want, including the reporter. And all she wants for Christmas is for her boyfriend to propose. And she's like, hey, how did you know that? And he's really starting to get people to believe. But it's also said earlier in the movie that the best way to spread holiday cheer is by singing loud for all to hear. And that's something that Buddy had said to Jovi, and Jovi said that she doesn't like to sing in front of people, but now she gets up and starts singing Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and all of the people in the crowd start singing too, and wouldn't you know it, James, but that is enough magic for Santa's sleigh.
Yeah, but they sing the same verse of Santa Claus is Coming to Town over and over, what seems like 20 minutes or so.
I mean, if everyone knows the words, why are you going to just mix it up and start some other song?
But it's the same exact song. Have them cut to like other well-known Christmas carols. But anyway, I'm thinking too much about this. But Santa Claus is able to start his magic sleigh again. And wouldn't you know it, Santa marches off to be the Santa Claus that we all know into the sky and deliver presents.
Marches off?
He slays off. Oh, wait, does he slay off? I don't know.
He flies.
He flies. Well, does he? I guess he flies off, yeah, in his sleigh, led by Rudolph. We get a little epilogue that everyone kind of lives happily ever after because Buddy ends up with Jovi, and they have a very sweet little baby boy. And the
girl,
dad,
Susie.
Girl, yes, that's right. And the dad, Walter, he has learned to basically have the Christmas spirit all year round. And he's a good family man now. He takes care of both of his sons. And also, wouldn't you know it, but he finds out a good bestseller in the wacky story of his estranged son when he basically makes a children's book called Elf.
Right. And it ends on a happily ever after note. It's very cute. And so now that we've gotten to the end of the movie, James, do you think that Elf stands a test of time?
As a kid who grew up Jewish and is Jewish, I have to say I never quite got the whole Santa thing, to be honest. It's not like a religious character that probably doesn't exist, maybe not. No, this is a character that everyone knows doesn't exist, but we lie to children about, and then at some point, at about third grade or so, they're either brokenhearted or traumatized once they find out that this thing was a lie. And the slight nods that always take me out of Christmas films is this whole idea that Santa is really the person bringing presents to every single person. And they even make a joke that they're even saying it's parents that do it. So I guess it just stands up because it's always there. But that idea to me never really did stand the test of time. I've never quite understood it, but I do love the fat man. He's a jolly old fat man with what do they say? With a belly full of jelly.
That is not a thing people say.
Okay, well, maybe that was Winnie the Pooh. I'm not sure. But this film, it really is, it's a perfect Christmas film because it really has very little to do with anything religious. It's Christmas in the American Christmas idea that Christmas is about a tree and tinsel. So, it's a really relatable film to everyone, whether you celebrate Christmas or not. It's just a very funny film. And honestly, I'm surprised that films like this are incapable or ineligible for Academy Awards because I think, honestly, Will Ferrell had an Academy Award-winning performance in this film because this is really a stupid film. And there are so many parts in this film that I was watching and just thinking, if that was another actor that I think is funny, say Alec Baldwin, this is not funny. And maybe Jim Carrey could do it, but Will Ferrell, this is perfect. You were describing a scene before where Will Ferrell runs, he bounces on the couch and jumps on the tree, hugs it for a second, and then it slowly tilts over and falls down. It's not funny on paper. It's hysterical when Will Ferrell does it. And, you were saying before about Michael, he kind of just likes Buddy because, he saved him in a snowball fight. I think it's more he found out that Buddy's weird, but he's kind of fun weird. Like the next scene is them going crazy and they're bouncing on the mattresses in Macy's or Gimbals, and it's a lot of fun. Jon Favreau, I mean, for one of his first films that he directed, it's wonderfully directed. The last 10 minutes, it's schmaltzy stuff. And when I catch this film on television, I don't need to watch it really after the Miles Finch scene. There's not much comedy after that. So I'll usually, honestly, like, that's when I could turn it off when I used to have cable and this was on TBS all day or something. But overall, this is a fantastic film. And does it stand up as a Christmas film? Absolutely, this stands the test of time. What do you think, Al? Does this film stand the test of time?
Yes, of course it does. It is a modern Christmas classic. I very much enjoy this movie. You were talking about it from the perspective of a Jew. I did just want to mention that it caught my eye watching this movie in the credits that it was written by a guy named David Berenbaum. And I was like, that's a pretty Jewish sounding name. According to IMDb, he was raised Jewish, but his family celebrated Christmas. So it's not totally unheard of that he would write a Christmas movie. But I very much enjoy this movie. My kids really loved it. I think you could argue that Walter's turnaround from being the cold-hearted Scrooge-like character to choosing his family and doing the right thing, like that turn kind of comes out of nowhere. It's not like A Christmas Carol where the whole thing is about how Scrooge learns his lesson. It kind of comes quickly in this movie, but who cares? That's not the point of this movie. The point of this movie is seeing Will Ferrell be goofy and just being a fish out of water, and it's funny. We talked about Crocodile Dundee not that long ago and how that's basically a fish out of water story of a guy in New York City, and how most of those jokes fell flat. Like, these jokes land. I do think it's worth pointing out that this movie takes place in New York City. It was filmed in 2002, 2003, right after 9/11. It's a slightly kinder, gentler New York City than we've seen in, like, the 80s movies where it's like the urban hellhole kind of a thing. The people in this New York City are, by and large, generally friendly. The security guards who throw Buddy out, I guess, aren't. And Artie Lang is like a kind of, rough around the edges New Yorker. But mostly the New Yorkers in this movie are friendly and hospitable. Speaking of Artie Lang, I do think that you could also criticize this movie just because there are so many other actors in here that are very, very funny that don't really have an opportunity to do anything all that funny. Artie Lang gets a little bit of time to shine. Amy Sedaris is Walter's secretary. She's hilarious. She doesn't really have anything funny to do. Andy Richter and Kyle Gass as Walter's writers. I mean, they're hilarious on their own. Although it is kind of funny, like, getting a little meta about it. The two of them are known for being funny sidekicks. Maybe some people would object to Kyle Gass being labeled a sidekick because he's half of Tenacious D, but he's also kind of Jack Black's sidekick. And here they are together, these two really funny guys, and their bright idea in the movie is to bring someone else in, which is a little meta. But, these guys are all very funny, and they don't really have a chance to be very funny in this movie, but that's just because Will Ferrell is hogging the spotlight, but not hogging it in a bad way, like deserving the spotlight that he has. So I think the movie definitely stands a test of time. There's one joke about, he says that he jammed 11 cookies into the VCR. I guess that's kind of dated, but whatever, who cares? Elf definitely stands a test of time. If you're looking for a funny movie to watch at Christmas time, you can't go wrong with Elf.
And, kudos to Will Ferrell. Apparently, he turned down, and this is believable based on how much of a classic this movie became. He turned down a reported $29 million to make an Elf 2. And he basically said it would just be a horrible film, so he didn't do it.
He said that he didn't want to do it as like a middle-aged man. James Caan apparently said in an interview that Will Ferrell and Jon Favreau didn't get along, which kind of bums me out because I like both of them and I want to imagine them having like a great time on set and not fighting throughout the movie. That's kind of just like a bummer to hear about. It's fine that it was a one and done. It was a Broadway musical for a year. I didn't see it, but I think it got pretty good reviews if I'm remembering right. Maybe. I don't know.
Actually, I think it was kind of one of those notorious big flops. I thought it was. Or there were a lot of movie adaptations recently that have been big flops, so I'm not sure if this is one of them.
I'm not sure. If anyone saw the show, let us know if it was good or not. But James, that's going to do it for us this year. We are done for 2020. But don't worry, we will be back for 2021. And our first movie of the new year is going to be 1933's The Invisible Man. We're throwing it way back.
Yeah, and until then, remember to subscribe on whichever podcast provider you're listening on. You can visit our website at testoftimepod.com. You can send us an email to thetestoftimepodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find us at Test of Time Pod. So we'll see you next time, everyone.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2021. Bye, everyone.
Then we pass through the 7 layers of the candy cane forest.
7 levels! 7 levels! 7 levels! Everybody knows that, man. Come on!